Okay, welcome everyone to this session on policy instruments for sustainable connectivity. My name is Rita Neves, and I will be with you for the next 1.5 hours, chairing these sessions. I would like maybe just to start by sharing with you something very important. I would like just to start by sharing with you a very nice view from this place so that you can enjoy it a bit. So this is actually, it's Lake Maggiore. It's the view from Ispra, a small village in Italy where I'm located. And I'm sharing this not only that you can start this session with a more relaxing picture, but also to tell you that Ispra is actually home to more than 1,000 scientists who work at the Joint Research Center. And here the Joint Research Center is the in-house science service of the European Commission, and its main mission is to carry out research to support European Union policies. So one of its main challenges is indeed to bridge the divide between science and policy. So today I'm very happy to chair this session, which will count with 3 very rich presentations. They may seem very different in nature, in their fields of research, but at the same time, they all look at the impacts of global connectivity on sustainability, being it locally, or globally in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, or locally in terms of looking at the impacts that connectivity may have in local communities and local environments. So without losing any more time, I would like now to start off by introducing our distinguished speakers that we have here today. For this, I would invite you to continue this travel, and now we will go to Spain, to Madrid, where we have Lara, Lázaro, and Mario Esteban, who are senior analysts at Elcano Royal Institute. Lara is an economist and has a vast experience on the energy and climate change fields. And Mario has been working extensively on international relations of East Asia, as well as domestic and international politics of China. So Lara and Mario, thank you very much for joining us today. Hello.
Hello. Thank you very much, Anna.
Thank you. Now, we continue our journey to Indonesia, where we have maybe, as Bustanul, I believe he has not yet joined yet, I will introduce Ibnu. Ibnu Budiman, so he shared this picture with me. It's probably from the place where close to the beach, close to his place. Ibnu Budiman, sorry, is a researcher at the World Resource Institute. His research focuses mainly on environmental policy and governance, and is particularly interested in connections between state and non-state actors in the topics of environmental governance. So thank you, Ibnu, for joining us. Hello, Ibnu.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And then our next speaker, who has not yet arrived, I believe I cannot see now, is Bustanul Arifin. Bustanul is a professor of agricultural economics in the University of Lampung, and he has over 30 years of experience in research in the fields of food, agricultural policy, and sustainable development. So I'd like to thank you all for coming to this virtual session and for joining us here, both speakers and participants. And I think we are able to move now to the first presentation of the day, which should be the alignment of Chinese financing with the Paris Agreement, propaganda, aspiration, or reality. But first, let me show just one more picture. I like to show you pictures. So this was the historic moment when in December 2015, the Paris Agreement was adopted in France. So the Paris Agreement is a universal climate change agreement adopted by 195 governments under the United Nations, actually United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And these governments got together to agree on a global action plan to combat climate change and adapt to its effects. So now, what I think we are all looking forward is to hear our first speakers of the day, Lara and Mario, and they will tell us whether China's Belt and Road Initiative is aligned or not aligned with the Paris Agreement. So Lara, the floor is yours, or actually the screen is yours, and you may share your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I hope we could really give you a definite answer to the question. I'm afraid that the picture is going to be darker than perhaps what we would have hoped, but there might be elements that in the future might be conducive to a greener, not a green, but greener and slightly more aligned BRI with the Paris Agreement. So next slide, please. And thank you so much for sharing, because had a few technical issues. So next slide, please. So that's the brief outline of the presentation. We'll present to you with the research question, literature review, methods, discussion, conclusions, and a few takeaways. So as Anna was saying, our question is the BRI aligned with the Paris Agreement? We have focused on the energy sector. As many of you probably know, the energy sector is 73% of global emissions in 2018. There is more detailed information in the nationally determined contributions on energy than on other sectors. We also have divided the analysis into two sub-periods, the 2014, so the year after BRI started to be live, to 2016. So that is the year in which the Paris Agreement came into force by the end. As you probably remember, the Paris Agreement entered into force after 55 parties that amounted to 55% of greenhouse gas emissions ratified the agreement. That happened on the 4th of November 2016. So we have that first period in which the Paris Agreement is not yet in force, and the 2017 to 2019 period in which we do have the Paris Agreement in force, and we have the BRI International Green Development Coalition, not Cooperation, sorry. We'll correct that before you have it online. And there's a flurry of initiatives in China to deliver a green BRI from 2017 onwards. There's guidance initiatives, plans, etc., both by the government in China, but also by the financial institutions. Next slide. So we want to see whether we can see, after that entry into force of the Paris Agreement, a change in finance and an alignment with the Paris Agreement. So the current literature is overall divided. There's not a lot of meta-analysis of the literature. This publication, which we highly recommend, the Hale, Liu and Uppalainen, recognizes 5 strands of literature. The first of them talks about foreign policy literature. It's the foreign policy space that focuses on the geopolitical and geostrategic, with some domestic drivers for BRI investments. There's a second strand of the literature that focuses on quantitative analysis of the BRI. And I think perhaps the Joint Research Center can help us out here because of the very limited amount of data. The databases do not cover the entire period. They don't cover exactly the same thing. So it's a bit difficult to build on research and policy analysis without that overall quantitative literature data. Sorry. So there's sort of 2 sub-strands within this quantitative analysis of the BRI. The global overview of finance and projects is the first one, and the second strand of the literature, which we are particularly interested in, is the sustainability of BRI investments and their impacts on NDCs, on nationally determined contributions, and the Paris Agreement. There's a third strand of literature that talks about BRI as a top foreign policy priority, but serving divergent interests and actors. So basically an umbrella of BRIs within the grand BRI strategy. There's a fourth strand of literature that talks about BRI in recipient countries and criticizes the China-only accounts of BRI. And a final strand of the literature that talks about processes, policies, frameworks, and institutions by which BRI is delivered, and how these different actors connect and interact with each other. Next slide, please. So the gaps in the literature that we seek to address are the limited analysis of environmental and climate governance challenges in the BRI, and the role of the international climate regime in driving climate action along the BRI. Our approach is based on Ostrom's polycentric climate governance framework, so polycentricity, understood as an interaction between multiple authorities at different places, most of them acting independently when making rules and norms. And the idea of governance, although you know, I like the Koeman, even if it's an old quote, I like the idea that we're still in a period of creative mess, if you will, in terms of governance. The governance is a concept that is still in flux, but some of the core ideas that are consensual, if you will, is that from the 80s onwards, the control and the steering and the guidance has been displaced up to the international level, so from the nation state to the international level, down to regional and local levels, and out to non-governmental and civil society organizations. Next slide, please. We base our research on both primary and secondary research methods, obviously literature reviews and grey literature official documents published by the Chinese authorities. As for the primary research, we have conducted semi-structured, in-depth elite interviews, mainly in China, but also in other countries, with different stakeholders, research and institutions and academics, think tanks, business associations, policymakers, NGOs, finance, and international organizations. You have all of the logos there for a quick sort of overview. Next slide, please. What we see here is, and this is part of the analysis and the results, is that we have sort of broad guidelines and that are mainly voluntary in nature in order to green not only our development system, but in particular the BRI. So from the Paris Agreement, we have that Article 2.1c states that finance flows have to be aligned with a low carbon development model. The Belt and Road Initiative, International Green Development Coalition, is also fostered to the achievement of Sustainable Development Goals, and we know that SDG 13 is climate action. So that is the international overarching framework of rules. We also have government and ministries and public institutions issuing green credit guidelines, guidelines for environmental protection in forest investment, environmental risk management initiatives. We have BRI official documents, so guidance on promoting a green BRI, visions and actions, energy cooperation, etc. And we also have Chinese banks issuing green guidance and green policies. So China Development Bank, the Exim Bank of China, Construction Bank, Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, and AIIB. The issue with all of these guidelines are that they are not mandatory. They are voluntary guidelines. So it's a soft approach to steering behavior along the BRI. And I think that's the key idea. It doesn't have teeth. So whereas, for example, environmental impact assessments in China are mandatory, when going abroad, when going overseas in BRI projects, these are not always undertaken. And this is an issue. And the institutions that implement the projects are not subject to sanctions. So that is another issue that weakens the clout of these guidelines and initiatives. Next slide, please. So this is, oh, sorry, it's a bit blurry. Building on the work by World Resources Institute, Zhu et al., 2008. This is a sort of a broad overview of Chinese investments in some BRI countries by type of instrument and subtype and data sources. So what we see here is that we have debt and equity. We have within debt, we have syndicated loans that are participated by various banks, both Chinese policy banks and Chinese state-owned commercial banks. We also have within debt loans exclusively financed by the CBD or Exim, and within equity, Silk Road Fund, and non-financial, Chinese non-financial enterprises, state-owned enterprises, and private-owned enterprises. They each have a different profile. Next slide, please. In terms of allocation of financial flows within the energy sector, what we see here is in the graph, in the x-axis, so in the horizontal axis, we have the different types of funding streams with the different institutions. So the first column would be syndicated loans, the second loans exclusively, starting from the left-hand side of your screen. So the first column, syndicated loans, the second column exclusively financed by CDB and Exim Bank, the third, the Silk Road Fund, the fourth would be state-owned enterprises, SOEs, and the fifth, private-owned enterprises, POEs. The y-axis, so to the complete left on your screen, you see the percentage of funding allocated to the different types of energy sources. So the dark blue there is to oil, gas, and petrochemical. The light blue is fossil fuel energy generation. The green is renewable energy generation. The yellow is nuclear energy. The purple is transmission and distribution, and the green is not specified. The light green is not specified. So what we see here is that approximately 80% of the funding from 2014 to 2017 from this funding sources, and again, bear in mind that this is not the entire set of BRI project, because there is no database that covers the entire set of BRI projects, and there's a problem also, or issues with the definition of what constitutes BRI project and what doesn't constitute BRI project. But the key idea here is that the bulk of investments in the energy sector from all of these institutions throughout this period goes to fossil fuels, which is not aligned with either NDCs or with the goals of the Paris Agreement. Next slide, please. So if we can come back to this a bit later, because I'm conscious of time, but the idea is that no matter how we slice it, and here what we have done with another database is divided between BRI and OECD countries. We know there's a partial overlap. We've taken out we've only included in OECD the OECD less, so taking out BRI countries so that we don't have an overlap. And what we see here is that if we divide the analysis within two periods, in the first period, so 2014 to 2016, which is in the inner circle to the left-hand side of the screen, 30% of the funds allocated to construction, energy investments and construction are allocated to renewable projects, whereas almost 70% of the investment has gone to non-renewable energies. So again, we see that overall, more funding goes to non-renewable sources. This is changing in the second period. So we see that 30 goes out in the outer circle to a 41% in renewable projects in the second period, so 2017 to 2019. So that gives us at least some hope for thinking that maybe there is something happening after the entry into force of the Paris Agreement, and to explore what that is. Next slide, please. If we analyze OECD countries, the picture is a bit more balanced. Yet leave it there because we can go back to the OECD and BRI only countries later. I want to focus on this slide now. This it might look a little bit complex. I'll try and run you through. So we have on the x-axis, on the horizontal axis, we have the years 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. On the y-axis on the left-hand side, we have installed capacity measured in gigawatts. And on the right-hand side, we have annual investment in current prices of the contract. Okay, and what we have inside of that slide, we have two sets of data. We have investment data, which is seen in the black line, and oh no, if you go forward one slide, please. Sorry. Thank you. So if you look at the black line, the black continuous line, that is investment in non-renewables, investment in US billion. And if you look at the wobbly blue line, that is investment in US billion in renewable sources through time. What we have in the bars is the capacity added. So I think this brings out an interesting picture, because we see that over the entire period, the capacity additions in gigawatts from non-renewable resources is always above renewable resources. The finance is overall skewed towards fossil fuel resources as well. We see that from 2017 onwards, there's a convergence, there's a reduction, and this is only policy banks. So this is a database from Boston University only covering policy banks, which is China Development Bank and Exim Bank. So the finance of these two banks converges towards 2019. Fossil fuels is a bit higher, but still they both converge around the 1.3 billion mark, whereas capacity additions still are higher for fossil fuels than for renewable energy resources. And in 2019, it trebles the capacity. Next slide, please. So in terms of discussion, we have seen that overall funding goes to fossil fuels. Perhaps there's an emerging picture of something that's happening. We will only know whether this is for sure if we have more data that covers not only CDB, China Development Bank and Exim Bank, but if we would also have data on syndicated loans, etc., Silk Road Fund, private-owned enterprises, state-owned enterprises, we would be able to see this in more detail. What we have tried to do with the interviews and the semi-structured elite interviews is to analyze why this is happening, why BRI is very much skewed towards fossil fuels to date. We see that there is the goal of less carbon-intensive BRI. There is a will of China to gain access to global environmental governance, responsible actor status. And this is counteracted by short-term business and development opportunities for host governments, but also for Chinese financing institutions and companies. We know that China is embarking in a new normal development model, that they are striving for an ecological civilization, but this leaves excess capacity that can find a way to be deployed through BRI investments. So greening through BRI is an aspiration, but it's been done by soft guidance and lack of sanctions for non-compliance. So we might be seeing a slight shift, but we have not seen an overhaul of the financing and an alignment of BRI with the Paris Agreement yet. So there's a need for both building capacity across institutions. These guidelines are very high level, but there's a lack of personnel and lack of checks throughout the project value chain. So there's a need to build capacity. There's a need to change the corporate culture. There's a need for BRI recipient countries, according to the literature, to produce NDCs that are more concrete within the energy sector, but also within the transport sector, which is one of the big emitters. Next slide, please. And the main takeaways, again, first, and going back to Anna, mind the data gaps. A significant amount of international Chinese initiatives to green the BRI. 80% of energy sector financial flows to BRI countries to fossil fuels, according to Zhu et al. Within our deep dive into China's main policy banks, we see that that trend continues, but perhaps with some sort of nuance within the second sub-period, 2017 to 2019, far from being aligned with the Paris Agreement and fostering NDCs in BRI recipient countries to date, but BRI being inspirational. And key reasons, because we are accommodating demands from different domestic and international actors in climate governance. And thank you very much for listening. I hope I haven't taken too much time, and happy to hear your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lara, for this, for sharing with us this interesting piece of research. I would like now also to open the floor for questions for the audience. So please feel free to use the chat there and write your questions. We still have a couple of minutes, just some direct questions, clarifications that you might have, or comments to Lara and Mario. Maybe from my side, it's interesting because this week it happened something very important. you know what it is. It's AESCON conference, of course. I mean, there was an announcement by the Chinese president at the United Nations General Assembly that China aims to achieve climate neutrality by 2060. And I think this is was quite a big announcement. Of course, it's not yet formally written or officially adopted. But I don't know, maybe if you could share a bit your views on this, how will China also rethink their infrastructures, investments? Of course, we see that at least what they are investing in other countries, with the BRI, you were mentioning 80% goes to fossil fuels, but maybe within China, when they commit with this target, what are your views? What do you think will happen? Are you optimistic, pessimistic? Let us know, Mario and Lara, please. Mario.
Okay. First of all, yes, I think it's important to underline, as you mentioned, that these commitments are for China. And now we are here, like we are talking more about what China is doing overseas through this Belt and Road Initiative. So I think it's relevant to highlight that, of course, Chinese authorities are much more committed to reaching like climate change targets at the domestic level than abroad. I mean, they have much more pressure from public opinion for doing this at home than doing that abroad. And I think that here it's also relevant to distinguish, as we mentioned, I mean, to some extent in our paper, that one thing is the long-term perspective and a different thing is the short-term perspective. I mean, it's quite obvious, I think, for in the literature and also in the people when you conduct field research, I mean, with the relevant stakeholders on this issue, that there is like a consensus on a long-term perspective that sustainability is key, not just for China, but for the whole world. And Chinese policymakers are quite aware of that. But the short-term perspective is quite different. You know, there are a lot of growth intense pressure for supporting growth intensive policies, you know, at the moment. Even before the COVID-19 situation, I mean, because of the slowdown of the Chinese economy, some of the friendly climate change policies that were implemented, like the freezing of the construction of coal power plants in China, were reversed. So I think we need to be aware, right, of this like short-term focus and on the long-term perspective. And I think that's part of what we're trying to explain in our paper. If I may, just 30 seconds, you know, to elaborate on one point, because, you know, we were quite aware that because of the time constraints, we couldn't explain like everything, you know, in the presentation. And I think it's important to underline that, as Lara mentioned, that Chinese authorities are trying to push for a change in the capabilities of their own financing and construction companies in terms of implementing, you know, our sustainability targets, also on climate change, on a climate perspective, and also of a change in the corporate culture. Because, I mean, all these financing institutions, all these construction firms, they have short-term incentives for keep going with these coal power plants projects, and they also have a consolidated tradition of doing so. They feel very comfortable operating with those kind of projects, you know. So the government is giving them like positive incentives to change. Sometimes it's not, you know, like negative incentives. It's not coercive approach. It's positive incentive. They were trying to promote more abroad, you know, the companies that are in the forefront of this changing, you know, of culture, of corporate culture. Yeah. So I think it's important to underline, you know, this short-term perspective against this long-term perspective.
And if I may, coming back to your question, I think it's great that we have this announcement. We were talking, Mara and I were talking yesterday, and I think it's, you know, we want to see it in the NDC and in the long-term strategy, and we want to see the 14th five-year plan and see how it really sort of plays out by the letter. And I also think that it's important to note that the idea of ecological civilization and the achievement of the SDGs for the BRI is phased in, as Mary was saying, in the medium to long term. So it's not surprising that perhaps we're not seeing the change now within the BRI, because 2025 is the year that China has given itself, if I'm not mistaken, to implement the ecological civilization sort of concept within BRI, and 2030 as it is for the rest of the international community for achieving the SDGs. So perhaps that also plays a role. Thank you.
Thanks very much for this clarification. We have a question from the chat, so maybe very quickly I will read it to you and then we move on to the next speaker. So the question is from William Becker. Hello, if the BRI is to be better aligned with the Paris Agreement, to what extent is this the responsibility of China compared to the host countries? Or should we both work towards this aim?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a very relevant, excellent question. It's a very relevant question, and we were discussing a lot of this also during the interviews, you know, because Chinese authorities, when you look the pressures they face from abroad, there are like two different contradictory pressures. On the one side, you have the OECD countries, you have this alliance of small island states, countries also, that they want Chinese financing to be more aligned the Paris Agreement, but at the same time, you know, many host governments of these BRI energy projects, they have like a more short-term perspective, you know, in terms of development. And actually, you know, it's interesting because different Chinese stakeholders, they have like different approaches towards those host governments. I mean, these financing construction companies, they feel more comfortable with the business as usual model, you know, so they don't push, you know, for a change, you know, on the perspective of the host governments. But at the same time, you know, there are like some Chinese institutions working on climate change and international cooperation on climate change. Then they conduct field works, missions, you know, and trainings, you know, for officials from these countries trying to change this perspective, because of course this is like a joint responsibility. So I mean, you find different actors in China, you know, looking at this at a different way. But just last sentence, just be aware, as you know, that China will never, or at least, you know, for the time being, it wouldn't have like a hard approach towards this, you know, trying to put strong pressure, you know, on the host project countries in order to accept, you know, this more higher climate change standards. Because at the end of the day, you know, the official position of this is that this is responsibility. The NDCs are responsibility for every single state. You know, so China, you know, will push hard for that.
Thank you very much. We still have one more question, but maybe we'll have to leave it for the end, the last session, because we now need to move to our next speaker. And I would like now to welcome Bustanul Arifin. He will tell us. Thank you for joining us. Finally, you managed. And you will tell us all about partnerships for sustainability between smallholders in Asia and corporations in Europe. and give us a closer look of what's going on in this area in Indonesia, particularly at the local level. I think this presentation touches upon a very important issue, which is that of the sustainability certifications. And this is the way that we have to know that the products we buy that are produced in ways that are meeting certain standards from environmental to social. So I would really like to invite now Bustanul to please take the floor and share your presentation with us and tell us how is this partnership for sustainability benefiting the smallholders farmers in Indonesia. Thank you. The floor is yours, Bustanul, please.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Anna. Thank you for the introduction. I have, let me say good afternoon from here, good morning actually, I'm here is the afternoon. Okay, this research is conducted by myself and Novi Rosanti and Hanung Ismono, they are in the audience. I think she should share the video so everybody can see you. Okay, next please. Can I share myself or cannot? Well, that's okay. You can go ahead. Okay. Given the time, I have at least 5 points I would like to share with you. First, I would like to introduce the Indonesian coffee economy. Then the theme is partnership for sustainability, especially in Asia, with companies in Europe. I think I could mention mostly Nestle. Then try to tell the objective of the research, then share the result, mostly some numbers of econometric analysis, then interpretation, then the last one is conclusion and recommendation, the thing that we could take home together. Okay, I think I can share myself here. Hopefully I don't have any problem from now on. Indonesia is the 4th largest coffee producer, okay, after Brazil and Vietnam. We used to be number 2, number 3, but Vietnam take us. Vietnam, I think actually they learned from Indonesia how to grow coffee, but they use very, very intensive methods. But people predict Vietnam probably have some trouble in the environment in the future. We are the 2nd largest Robusta now. Last year, the production is not very much, it's about 700,000 hectares, little bit increase, but our productivity is quite low compared to Brazil. We are just below 1 hectare, sometimes only below 1 ton per hectare, so only 560 kilograms per hectare. The majority of our coffee farmers are smallholder. Smallholder is they control less than 1 hectare of land. Okay, you can see women involved as well. Then these family farmers, after selling the products, they went home from the market and go back to the house, to the home. Okay, what is the sustainability in concern? First, we introduced the green one, agroforestry, okay? Coffee agroforestry has been around since 1990, I could say. Then, from that on, I think Anna has been familiar with this theme, the global sustainability certification coming, all private big companies coming to buy coffee, not only to Indonesia, of course, but to Colombia, to Brazil, to Ethiopia and everybody. They establish the networks, I could say. The smallholders have to partner with them, otherwise they cannot have quote-unquote access. Well, in theory, of course, there are free access, free market access, but if you do not partner with them, it's not easy to fulfill the world market. But at the same time, for our farmers, small farmers, we really need it, they really need it to partner with corporation, because sometimes they provide technical assistance, market information, and other programming, empowerment, and so on. If you see this picture, This is what we call it agroforestry. You have coffee, yeah, this is Robusta type. You have to have shade trees. Shade trees, I think they function as really a shade tree to reduce the heat, but at the same time, they could control the erosion. They could do as a conservation. So we call it, sometimes we call it complex agroforestry. And you can see this, then the coffee is being processing and then shipped. The left picture here, look at say the what we call the fragile of the environment. The erosion is very high here. This protection forest. Okay, what we set up the research and like this, we analyze the institutional dimension of the partnership. Okay, we interview a lot of people. We do what we call in-depth analysis, focusing on those who work in our province. This is very case studies. Then we interview farmers. The total is 78 from this district and 93 from Tanggamus district. We have 2 districts. So we divided they partner and they don't partner. And of course, you can imagine we compare. Okay, the context of our sustainability connection, here, Nestle joined FOSI. I think if you have your FOSI is common code for coffee community. But also, before it was changing, we have RFA, Rainforest Alliance, affiliated with ECON. ECON is actually a French company as well. Okay, they established, as I mentioned earlier, because they need a partnership, they established, they call it ICS, internal control system. We use them to take the sample. We use cluster random sampling based on the number of population of people in the villages. Okay, this is our analysis. This is a very simple probit model. Probit is we use the dependent variable, whether they partner or they don't partner. And then we do the factors of explanatory variable. And we also estimate the income determinants from the regression or LS model. Then the third one, we use treatment effect model. Why treatment is important? We try to treat whether there is what they call selection bias or not. Sometimes they may not. So we treat it econometrically to reduce the bias of the estimate. Okay, what are the partnerships then that we talk about? There are 2 in our 2 sub-districts. There are, we call it subcontract partnership, and the second is really a general pattern agreement. General trading is quite loose. The ICS here, the exporters here, exporters of course affiliated with the big companies. Then the farmers from here to collector agent, then to exporter, or there is certification agency, what I mean by FOSI and Rainforest Alliance. Or the more complicated one in the left side, we call it subcontract partnership. There's an agreement, sometimes written, but sometimes not written, only known by the head of the farmers group. We call it based kind of cooperative. It is a local term. The partner here company, of course, affiliated with European company with the roaster, which is Nestle. They have a roastering company at home. And then a certification agency. So these 2, then we compare the 2. Let's see, let me show you briefly how was our farmers. Our farmers actually quite well mid-age. The average is about 46 years old. They have more than elementary education, mostly farming about 22 years. Average family unit 3.6. The school age of, I mean, they call it dependent of the, it's not very big. It's not very big families, only small family. This is about the same in terms of average between 2 sub-districts. So I think, which is very interesting when we see the taxonometric result later. This is the difference, I mean, in terms of performance, okay? Look at the productivity yield, ton per hectare. The partnership, the farmers that do partnership have higher productivity. Okay, 787 above the national average anyway. Non-partnership is below 600 kilogram per hectare. The price is different here. The farm gate price different because the price determination is quite different. Compared to here, this Tanggamus is closer to the town here. The yield is lower in here, better in this district, and the price, of course, here is a little bit lower. Okay, now the result of the problem, the determinants, what factors influence or determine the partnership participation. Then you can see the significance level here. You can see age, you can see education, you can see family size, holding size of coffee, then the distance from the cooperative to the field, to the household, then income share from the coffee itself. Which is interesting here. That shape the partnership. I think you can imagine there must be a selection bias in here. Okay, I think I mentioned here there's some selection in becoming a partnership of coffee farmers. We expect something else, which is, for example, the number of shade tree. We call it MPTS, multi-purpose tree species in the coffee. But apparently, endogenous factor I think is more important. You don't have to see the numbers. What I mean here, the income of coffee farmers is positively affected by the proportion of productive family members in the partnership. It means you can imagine our farmers still use family laborers. Of course, they have hired laborers, but the roles of family laborers, including the woman, sometimes the children, after the school, the farmers also very significant in affecting the income of the farmer. In other words, if they don't work hard, I think they don't have a decent living. Okay, look at the numbers. The average is about the coefficient of partnership, 3 million rupiah means that being a partnership farmers increase the farm income for about $269 US. It's quite large in here in terms of the average income. Then I mentioned earlier, this is the I have mentioned earlier about the income level. Okay, this is the technical term, Mills Lambda in econometrics. It means there's a selection bias. Then, of course, farm income partnership is about 13 million higher, okay, 989 higher than non-partnership, which is very important. Being a partners, connecting Asia in global market, which is in this case, European market who buy our coffee, is also very important in that plan. In conclusion, okay, almost 15 minutes. First, about the institutional arrangement I have mentioned earlier. If they don't have ICS, internal control system, maybe the partnership will not work very well. So a partnership in the local, in the ground case, you have to have institution, something that really go to farmers, function as the extension agent, maintain the quality, do empowerment, make sure to come to the meeting, things like that. So ICS is very important. That's why sometimes like this, it is very, very interesting. Sometimes farmers, if they don't get good price, they try to seek another buyer, collector buyers, but eventually they're coming back to the whole the setup system. Okay, the second, ICS and Cuba is cooperative, okay? ICS internal control system. Connect the incentive system for smallholders to perform well in meeting the standards of the GAP. And opportunities for coffee corporation, for themselves, for the big companies, in securing the supply of the coffee bean. Of course, the quality requirement for the global market. This is very important conclusion. So it doesn't work in the empty space. It really based on attached to the institutional in the village, in the local area. You cannot forget the value system in the village and the society if you want to increase the production and productivity and of course the quality to meet the standard demand. The third, partnership for sustainability certification. Again, because they have to partner and they certify the coffee, green certification and everything. There is income, of course. Okay, but in this case, even though the degree of what do you call significance is different, MPTS is still have factors. But in our regression earlier, in terms of decision, is different one. In terms of income, is different one. But higher income among partnership is brought about by income higher in coffee yield and farm gate price, of course. Okay, the farm cost component, it's still higher in non-partner farming, which is interesting because they try and they don't have access to some good inputs. So the total farm income is still higher. I mentioned earlier. This is the conclusion. The recommendation like this, that if we really want to continue to strengthen the partnership, the public policy is to establish a clear legal framework, written code, okay, because this is contract actually, and consensus provision that benefit both smallholder and global coffee corporation. I think further research on principal agents, transaction costs, so this kind of thing is still very relevant if you want to continue research on this. Trust level is very important. If you want to do partnership for sustainability, you have to establish the trust level, social capital, do empowerment and everything. The sophistication of partnership rule, contracts, regulation, again, might be quite specific for a crop and geographic characteristics. So our job as researchers actually try to establish, to develop common denominators that might be working in other places. So we can expand the idea or the case coming from Lampung, from Indonesia, probably to other cases. We are publishing this report or this research, but we are still in the revision. We're still working hard to that. Thank you, Anna. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Bustanul, for sharing with us this knowledge. It's actually a field that I personally was not so much familiar with it, so I think I learned something today. I wonder about the other participants, where there is any question, just feel free to post it in the chat, or any comment, any reaction, so just feel free to participate and raise your question to Bustanul. I don't know, from my side, I was just thinking a bit when you mentioned this cooperative, COOP, a rural cooperative. I don't know so much, just to clarify a bit. You mentioned that the distance to COOP is a stronger predictor of participation in the partnership. And I was wondering why is that? Is it because people who are members are better informed? Just to understand a bit what is the role of this cooperative. It's just clarifying.
Actually, to tell the story short, because during the authoritarian government, long time ago, politically they misused the word cooperatives. Okay, they try then affiliated to the political parties. Then farmers invent the term to use the local language. They call it cube. Actually, it is cooperative, but it's not formed, it's not registered as the old cooperative, this is in itself is an invention. It works like this. Okay, the cube have information, including, for example, if you have, okay, the price today is this much. They send the price from the collector through SMS to the farmers members. It works working as a price clearance, price information clearance for the members. The second, if there is gathering, for example, for training, technical training, including, for example, if you want to have a pruning technique and everything, and then in terms of new varieties of coffee, that cube is really a help. It works because each maybe 25 farmers have their farmers group, another 25 farmers have a farmers group, then all together it join into the cube, which is nice, okay. The good thing is they don't use words cooperative, which is really have some political meaning.
Okay, thank you very much.
That thing is what I call a social capital, very important to improve the trust. Then the global companies try to work together with them. For them, it's very expensive if they work one by one with the farmers, right? So they have to work with the groups.
Thank you very much. We have some questions from the chat, so I'd like just to pose to you from Simon Ellis. Is there a specific role for women in production?
Ooh, okay. The majority of our sample is men, of course. I think less than 30% is women. Yes, the women's roles normally, because women's involved in the picking, okay? In the picking. So the information from the cube, from the training, normally like this, okay? Transfer to women. Okay, ladies, please do not pick up the green bean, only the red bean only, for example. Then the women's aware, because if they pick up red bean, they can receive higher salaries, higher wages, because it's been already selected. That's affecting the quality of the coffee bean. Really significantly affect the quality. If you, as for saving the time, if you simply just doing like this to the bean, that's not good, because it takes another job to really grading again. So when women is very diligent in terms of cherry picking, red cherry picking only, for example, the first one. And the second, of course, women also influence, very influential in terms of possible economics decision making, including that. So generally at home, women really play important roles, but as not as the dominant. There are some culture, there are women very dominant compared to the men. Sometimes the men only hanging in the coffee shop or something. But in this case, man is doing the mostly for land clearing, do the big job. Women do mostly on diligent jobs.
Okay, thank you very much, Bustanul. There are more questions, but I'm afraid I will need to move on to the next speaker. But
I will answer to the chat. Okay.
Of course, you are very welcome to do so. Otherwise, we can always get back to it after all speakers have presented. But feel free to answer in the chat and to engage in the discussion with the participants. So maybe I would like now to welcome our next speaker, who is Ibnu Budiman. And we'll speak about one of the most valuable ecosystems on Earth, peatlands, which offers us so many ecosystem services, from clean water to control climate diseases and so on. But many of these ecosystems are at risk. So Ibnu will tell us how the concept of sustainable pilot economic zone can be a strategy for sustainable management of peatland ecosystem, and as well about the potential that connectivity can have in helping protecting these fragile ecosystems by learning and collaborating with other countries. So Ibnu, the floor is yours. Feel free to share your presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I will share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So, as already mentioned by Anna, Anna also already told us about what is peatland as an important ecosystem for, especially in this context, I guess, for the climate change mitigation. And so this research is conducted by me and colleagues at World Resources Institute Indonesia. So for the introduction, Indonesia has about more than 20 million hectares of peatland, and it means that this country has like the world fourth largest peatland, but until now, more than 2 million hectares of this peatland ecosystem has been degraded because of massive conversion to the large-scale plantations. And it has been causing devastating peatland fires, especially on the El Nino years, since 1982 until last year, 2019. So El Nino is the situation of warm ocean in Atlantic Ocean that cause longer dry season in Indonesia and Philippines. So that makes the fire is worse in this degraded peatland. And so far, the government already put some policy instruments for addressing this problem by last year, the government put the permanent ban to the peatland conversion to the concession area or plantation area. So the business permits is no longer granted for the plantation on peatland. And also since 2016, the government has making progress on restoring about 1 million hectare of peatland. But as I mentioned, that last year, that 2019, the big fires still happen, and also like as we know, the future is getting more complex and interlinked. And with the climate change, the frequency of El Nino will increase, and it means that also that the risk of fires in this ecosystem will increase as well. And also with the current situation of this pandemic, for example, yeah, you can imagine when these fires happen at this pandemic situation, it can cause more risk for the especially for the respiratory health for people. So therefore, the further policy measures are required. So in this presentation, I will present like some ideas from our research about what will be a further policy measure for sustainable peatland management. The first one is paludiculture. I will explain about this later, and also the adaptation of the concept of special economic zone to develop this paludiculture idea. And the last point will be about how the connectivity can support this idea. So this presentation is based on two research that we had done and published. The first one about the special pilot economic zone on peatland, and the other one about the paludiculture for the peatland restoration. And this research is actually also an example of the connectivity between Indonesia and Norway, where WRI Indonesia has done collaboration with Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs in conducting a number of sustainable forest management, and also including peatland management in Indonesia. So this is about the paludiculture. I will simply briefly mention about two important principles in paludiculture. The first one, that it has to plant native and adaptive species to a species that is native and adaptive to the physical characteristic of the peatland. And it has to be done on the wetted peatland, not on the dry peatland. And this is an example. This table shows that an example from previous study that actually done by the collaboration between Indonesia and the Netherlands. that identified about 500 of species that is suitable for paludiculture, and has been categorized into different category, and some of them are already proven to have the commercial value to be developed more in the for the sustainable economic activities. And this is the second principle of the paludiculture regarding its cultivation technique, which is the first thing is this has this should not involve any drainage activities. In the past and like until now, the large scale plantations, either it is timber or logging concessions or oil palm plantations, has been made the intensive canals on the peatland as you see in the picture, and this has caused peatland becoming dry and degraded, and then vulnerable to long dry season, and then easier to burn and then causing fires. So in this paludiculture concept, it should not involve any drainage activities because we use these native and adaptive species. And second point, also it's important to do the monitoring for several characteristics for biophysical characteristics and also socioeconomic characteristics on the cultivation practices. For example, the groundwater table on the area that indicate whether the peatland is in the good condition or is it degraded or dry. So in this context, in relation to the connectivity, like right now there has been a few projects in Indonesia that adapt this paludiculture principle, but not fully adopt the whole principle. So it could be said that it's not fully succeed yet. So to improve this situation, there will be needs for the knowledge or technological transfer to support this paludiculture application on peatland in Indonesia. And this is another idea that we found that could have potential to support this development of paludiculture, which is by adapting the concept of special economic zone. This special pilot bioeconomic zone is one of the concepts under the special economic zone by the UN Conference at Trade and Development. So in this concept, it allows this area to has like a different or special pilot economic measure. For example, by accommodating the sustainable businesses or sustainable economic activities that can involve the socio-environmental outcome, and also will be where the social and environmental standard will be regulated. And this has potential to attract the international investors in establishing this sustainable business on peatland. And also this is expected to address the challenges faced by the existing projects on peatland that I mentioned before, where there is an issue that some peatland products having the market issues. And last one, it also expect to support the income of a rural community. So this is the steps or that we propose how to design and implement this concept of special pilot bioeconomic zone to develop the paludiculture on the local level or on the landscape level. So I won't go into detail into these steps, but the main idea is to analyze the physical characteristics involving spatial analysis to choose the right area to be cultivated and then also to involve the social analysis to analyze the capacity and capability of farmers in doing this polyculture practice, and also important to design the social and social innovation and also business models to develop further this polyculture business. And in this context, I think the connectivity will be important, especially for the last point in designing the social innovation and business model in this context. And this is, we identified some other potential connectivities that can be further developed to support this idea of bioeconomic zone for polyculture. First is business collaboration with Germany, that has experience for polyculture development for the last 30 years, and also with the Netherlands, that has been promoting sustainable peatland management in Indonesia since 2000s through the Wetlands International NGO. And also I found that there are some special pilot economic zone that already established in Europe, for example, in Hungary, that could be also being a benchmark for this idea. And then there is a potential to strengthen the connectivity between especially these three countries, Germany, Indonesia, and Netherlands, because according to the AESCON portal, the German and Netherlands has more than 8,000 research collaborations, where I believe land use and agriculture are parts of it. And also Germany, through the GIZ, has done a number of climate actions and development projects in Indonesia, including on peatland management. So, but the issue is currently is this project is just like fragmented and scattered into different projects without proper connectivity between them. And there's also other potential networks that are also working on sustainable peatland management in Indonesia and Southeast Asia, for example, by the UK Research and Innovation body, and then as I mentioned before, from Norway, and also from there's a EU project on sustainable use of peatland and haze mitigation in Southeast Asia. So this number of so these institutions and these projects, I believe it has potential to be more connected, to be more to make more like a synergy to support the sustainable peatland management in Asia, especially in Indonesia and Southeast Asia. So this is an illustration of the peatland landscape, where in Indonesia we call it a peatland hydrological unit, and it consists of forest area and non-forest area. And this bioeconomic zone has potential to be developed, especially on non-forest area that can involve the villages and rural community, and it could also collaborate it with the existing plantations that already exist on the peatland. Yeah, this is an example of the one peatland hydrological unit where there's a potential to create a global connectivity on this local landscape by connecting different projects to support the idea of the economic zone to develop polyculture instead of doing the large-scale plantations on peatland that already prove bring a lot of environmental risks and also economical risks. And this will be further research for this topic, which is to assess the more policy instruments for the connectivity between both sides. We have done the one for Indonesia, identifying what are existing regulations on special economic zone, on sustainable peatland management, and also on peatland restoration. But we have not done yet to assess what are the policy instruments on the EU side or on those particular countries that I mentioned. That will be further research that will be useful to support this idea, to support this sustainable peatland management. And that's all. Thank you. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you very much, much, Ibnu, for sharing this research with us. I would like now to invite the participants. If you have a question for Ibnu, the moment is now for you to put it in the chat. So let's see if we have any question for you from the chat. In the meantime, maybe I just take the privilege of being the moderator to also pose you just a question. It's just out of curiosity in terms of the link peatlands and the Paris Agreement, as far as I know, also the countries are very much encouraged to include this in their commitments or in their climate mitigation and adaptation plans. Are you aware if Indonesia or any other countries are doing this to include the peatlands in these NDCs, the National Determined Contributions? It's just curiosity.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. I have not check in detail, like is there a specifically peatland mentioned on the NDC, but I believe it is mentioned as part of the climate mitigation target from the forest and land use sector. So that will be my answer for that, whether peatland is specifically mentioned on NDC. But another point that I could add on this question is currently is the government in partnership with different partners, including WRI Indonesia, is developing this low carbon development initiative that making a long-term plan for the climate action, climate mitigation, and also adaptation that make it into more detail. So it's sort of make the NDC becoming more detailed plans for the long term, that including the peatland conservation and peatland management for sure in that document. And I think the draft concept was already launched like last year.
This is very interesting. Thank you. We have a question from the chat. I will read it to you. The question is, more specifically, what kind of connections would you envisage between Indonesia and the European countries you mentioned? How would this connectivity begin? So to know a bit more about the collaborations that you foresee between you and some European countries.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, actually some connectivity or collaboration already began. With WRI Indonesia, between Indonesia and Norway, we have done a lot of collaborations for sustainable forest management and peatland management in Indonesia. We support the governments in creating various policy documents, for example, like a restoration plan for the peatland restoration in South Sumatra province in Indonesia. And also I mentioned that there are some other projects that already going on also. But the issue is that now it's so fragmented and scattered, like yeah, as you know, maybe in this so-called development industry, like there are different projects are going on, but it's hard to see like the connectivity between different projects, and especially in this context of peatland, like the peatland restoration has been started since 2016, and there are already a number of activities are going on in 7 provinces in Indonesia. But last year in 2019, in El Nino years, the extent of fires on peatland was larger than the fires in 2015. So there was an issue with the restoration activities that have been done and supported by different partners, which is like it should be done with the landscape approach, where the different activities, different restoration activities must be connected to each other. But it is not happened yet, and I think this could be a potential collaboration in the future to conduct the restoration activities with the landscape approach. and the connectivity will help because you can imagine like one peatland hydrological unit or landscape, it might have size like about 1,000 hectare, for example, and like one project won't be enough to do the whole activities. So the connectivity between different donors and different support will be helpful to make this landscape restoration approach could be implemented.
Okay, thanks very much, Ibnu. Maybe now it's the time for all the other speakers to join here on stage. Mario, Lara, I would like to see your faces as well. And also I would invite the speakers, if you have any questions to each other, you can also use our privilege as speakers to pose them. If not, we still have some pending from the chat. Maybe I would address to you if you don't have any questions for each other. So from the chat, we had a question at the end of Lara's session from Konstantin Holzer. The question for Lara and Mario is, does China still see its contribution to mitigating climate change in terms of common but differentiated responsibilities? This would mean that instead of reducing emissions, its main goal is still to improve energy efficiency and changing its energy composition. Over to you. If you want, maybe I can also read. There is a next question, another question for you. Maybe you can listen to both and address this other.
While Mario gets his headphones on.
Okay, so maybe I will also mention the other. Mario, are you listening? So there are two questions. The one from Konstantin, whether China still sees its contribution to mitigating climate change in terms of common but differentiated responsibilities. And the question from, I'm not sure how to pronounce, Prusti. Hello, my question is in the context of Article 2C of the Paris Agreement. Okay, she's mentioning the articles of the agreement and says that developed country parties shall and other parties that provide support should provide information on financial, technology transfer and capacity building support provided to developing country parties under the articles. So our question is, does China as a donor and countries receiving such financial support have to provide information on greening BRI initiative to the UNFCCC?
Long question. I see a question for me from Simon Ellis. Can I say something?
Wait just a bit. First Mario and Laura, and then we can go to you.
Okay, so regarding the first question, maybe Lara, you maybe like to go ahead then with the second question. Well, I actually already answered Konstantin, I mean, through the chat, you know, but...
I'm sorry, I haven't seen it.
No, it was a kind of a private, you know, so don't worry, you know.
Ah, so it was private. No, okay, then.
But
just summarize very quickly because we are also very close to end the session.
Yeah, okay, so, well, it's true that this is one of the objectives, but it's not enough, you know, because this is also this risk of stranding assets, I mean, linked with coal power plants. So yes, improving like efficiency, you know, it's not enough anymore, or it's not going to be enough, you know, sooner than later. You know? So yeah, just summarizing very, very quickly, you know.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I can just come in as well. The principle of common but differentiated responsibilities is the principle of the UNFCCC. So that hasn't gone away. The fact that we have a hybrid type of agreement in which nation states provide the nationally determined contributions and there's international oversight means that whatever the country wants to put forward in that NDC is what they are voluntarily agreeing to do. So while China could only do what it mentioned, you know, efficiency and high penetration of renewables, it has, as we mentioned before during the talk, announced that it will have bring forward the peaking date and go forward with the net zero goal for 2060. So while the principle is still it's still in place, and the hybrid agreement makes that possible through the NDCs. But in the future, we hope that we will have more homogeneity in the type of NDCs that we will have. And if we want to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement, we will indeed have to have a certain date for net zero. So absolute reductions in greenhouse gas emissions are crucial.
Thank you, Lara. So, Bustanul, we have a question for you from Simon Ellis, which is there evidence that certification would increase income?
Yes, thank you, Simon. Actually, the answer is not direct. To the simple question, the answer is not direct. It could increase the income if then the requirement do agricultural practices, maintain the standard and everything. So I think the more interesting one for this partnership is people, our smallholders is more aware that there is broader market. The market require higher quality of coffee. So technically they should increase the incentive to improve the quality. That from then it could increase income. But if the other way around, for example, if simply just to getting what we call as much as product it's gone without the quality, maybe it's not increasing the income, because coffee quality really matters. Then it's also improving the farm gate price, because otherwise, if there is no grading very good, the income is not getting high. But again, the key is really to improve the productivity and the quality.
Thank you very much. So we are really close to finish our session, and we would like also maybe just before finishing to make a poll for you. So I will ask Gregoire if he can put the poll live. In the meantime, I would like maybe just to go back to Lara when she mentioned all the data challenges, and she was addressing to me as if I would have the solution for them. But actually, we all share the same challenges, and even here, as I was mentioning to you before we start the session, we also had to develop, to gather lots of data in terms of sustainable connectivity between Europe and Asia. And during this time, we wanted to include so many indicators. And when we were faced looking for the data, they were simply not available. Data is collected very much in the past, so you have a huge lag, or it doesn't cover all the countries that we need to look at. So this is a challenge that still remains, though I don't know how we'll be able to address this in the future. We need to really put and to signal these needs for the data and to see whether countries and institutions start collecting this data in an harmonized way at a more global level. But of course, all these studies I think that we are doing, they are important for us really to foster these needs. So the poll is live now, and this is just a funny question just now for us to finish the session because it's really time. So from the places you have seen here, you go to the polls tab, by the way. From the places you have seen here today, which one would you like to travel now? And at the beginning of this session, I showed you some pictures from Italy, where I'm based, from Spain, where Mario and Lara are based, and from Indonesia, where Ibnu and Bustanul are based. So which one would you vote, where you would like to go now? Oh. And let's see, what's the most popular destination? Especially now with all the constraints we have with travels, we can at least dream of it. Let's see who wins.
I will vote Spain then.
Don't come to Madrid now.
Next time, not now.
Next time, yeah, next time. Yeah.
Indonesia, I think it's a very popular destination. I think that picture of the beach that Ibnu shared with us, I think it's the beach that you go. It's close to your place, Ibnu.
Yes, we welcome you, but not now.
Actually, we have a tie, Indonesia and Italy. We are tied. So I think Lake Maggiore is also a very nice destination, and I hope also you will be able to come here one day and visit us at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission based in Ispra. Maybe to close the session, I would like to invite all the participants to grab a drink, and we would meet in another session, a virtual coffee session, where we can a bit continue the discussions, also learn from the people who were in the other parallel session what was discussed, and this would be in a very informal way, as if we would leaving now the room of the conference and join other fellows on the hallway for the coffee. So feel free to join. We don't need to leave the session areas. We just need to go look for the virtual coffee session. But of course, first we do a break, 10 minutes, to stretch our legs, to have a drink, and then we can join their other colleagues. I would like also to mention to everybody that all presentations are available in www.aescon.org. The videos, the recordings of the sessions will also be made available. So already have the first day available, and the others within 2 days maximum, they will also be put there so that you can watch parallel sessions or other sessions that you were not able to be. And I can also tell you that also in www.aescon.org, you can also find the book of abstracts of this conference with all the researchers who have submitted abstracts to the conference. So I would really like to thank you very much. I think for me, this was a very interesting panel showing really different fields of research, but sharing something in common, of course. And I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. Thank you very much, all speakers, participants, and see you at the virtual coffee session. Goodbye.
Okay.
Thanks a lot. Bye now.